another proud moment in Jamestown Jammers history. We're glad to continue a good positive relationship with the Florida Marlins, and we got some big changes coming for the 2006 season. And to start that off, we're going to introduce Bo Porter with the Marlins as the Jamestown Jammers' new manager. Bo, hold on, is that your hat and your jersey?
Thanks a lot, Matt.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Wow. First of all, I want to say thank you to Matt and his whole staff. They've been very, very nice in this whole process. From the time I got the call from Bryant that the Marlins wanted me to come and manage the team here. With this being our 5th year, I think that the relationship is continuing to grow. I think it's a good situation for the Marlins. Having our young guys come to a place where they can really, really concentrate on baseball. I think this is a town that's rich in baseball. Baseball's been here for a long time. I'm excited about it. I know the Florida Marlins are excited, and I think that the players that we're going to get here are going to see that this is a really neat town for a minor league player to come and play his first year, or you may have some second-year guys that come here also. But a good place to start your professional baseball career. So I'm excited about it. I know the Jammers are excited. I think we're gonna put a good product on the field.
Number 1 draft pick, Jamestown Jammers.
So that, yeah, those are weights. It's a weight so that when they go up the bat slider. Oh. That was easy.
one of the visions I have of going down to the ballpark this year, and I am interviewing Steve Jones, who's the State College announcer who did football for Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he called your number several times when Penn State played Iowa. Does that kind of serendipity at this minor league level amaze you, that literally upstairs is a guy calling a baseball game of which you're managing, at the same time he has a history where he called your number as an Iowa football player?
I'm not going to say that happens every day, but with Penn State football being, as big of a part of, State College as it is, and them getting the baseball team there this year, I think from an experience standpoint, they wanted to have someone with experience. So I think that that's one of the things that allowed him to get into that position.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that other folks along the league that you find either you stumbled onto them in baseball or football or these other athletic connections? Have you found that to be the case?
No, that was actually the first time. That was actually the first time that I had experienced that, of running across someone who had did play-by-play for football and then also was working on the baseball end of it. So that's the first time it's happened.
Have you kept track of some of the guys you came up through, like with the Chicago Cubs? Have you kept track where they have gone, and have many of them stayed in baseball?
I've developed some of my best friends throughout baseball, and I still keep contact with Jason Maxwell. Actually, I talked to Richie Barker the other day, who I played with in the Cubs organization, and he made it to the big leagues with the Cubs. Trey Forkaway, Kevin Ellis, Kevin Ory. So, a lot of us still keep in contact with each other.
On a day-to-day basis with the communication, I know that when the day is done, you actually are out there working on the keyboards and sending in your reports. When you send the reports in, do they send reports back to you? Do you know what else is going on in the league itself?
Well, within our organization, I get all of our reports because I'm also the outfield and base running coordinator. So all of the coordinators get their game reports from all the games throughout the organization. So I'm kind of in dual capacity here. So I check the game reports for all of our other teams to see how the outfielders are doing and see how the teams are doing. And then I listen to the voicemails. And then also, of course, I send our game report and our voicemail every night.
Is it a lot more than you expected?
No. I think that I was well versed throughout, my playing career, and kind of positioned myself for this transition. So I asked a lot of questions at the latter part of my playing career. So I think I was well versed and well prepared.
Next, did they talk to you at all about next year?
I talked to Jim Fleming,
Mm-hmm.
who is our vice president and pretty much oversees the minor league operations. It all depends on what happens. I know I am up for consideration as far as the major league staff go next year. There's a possibility there, but I know for sure that they would like for me to be the full-time roving outfield and base running guy. So that would basically have me roving the entire year if any other avenues doesn't open up as far as me going to the major league staff.
That's got to be exciting.
Yes, it is.
How has this year helped you? This is your first year as a manager, where you're calling the shots here at a Class A short season. How do you think this is preparing you for the next step?
Well, I think from a development standpoint, and when I decided to get back into baseball, I had been so far removed from the lower levels that was one of the reasons why I chose to go to Greensboro last year, because I kind of wanted to get a sense of, at that level, as far as talent go, as far as development go, as far as players, making mistakes and so forth and so on. Whereas you get to AAA in the major leagues, you're used to the game being real clean. Mm-hmm. And then now you get to the lower levels, it kind of takes you back a notch so that you can better evaluate players from a standpoint of from where they're at right now to where it is you think they're going to be 4 or 5 years from now. So I think overall this was a really good experience to be able to get the guys right out of college and then also get the second, third year high school kid and kind of evaluate, both ends of the spectrum.
from some of the personnel that you've had here this year, I know in talking to Jim Fleming briefly, you know, it's always good for this fan in the stand to know who are the prospects.
Mhm.
There are the guys you hope to, but there are also the guys out there who you expect to make it. And who in that category of players that you had this year do you sort of expect to make it to AAA and ultimately the majors?
Well, I mean, I'd actually think that this was a really good draft class. I think our scouting department did an outstanding job. I think that, you know, Sink Bill, even though he was only here a short amount of time, I think that he has all, you know, all the tools and the makeup, you know, to be a major league pitcher. Unfortunately, Scott Cousins, who was also one of our higher draft picks, he was, you know, injured a lot this year's season. But if you had a chance to even see him for a brief moment, I mean, he has all the tools and all the abilities to be a major league center fielder. John Rayner, who also missed some time due to injuries, but in the times in which you've been able to see him play, I mean, he's a 5-tool guy who can really impact a game on offense, on defense. He has, you know, the potential to hit for some power. And even some of the young guys that we've brought up, you know, that we've brought up late. And then you have Chris Coughlin, who, you know, with his contract situation, him not being able to get here until late in the year, but even within the first 2 weeks, he was kind of behind a little bit. But now you're starting to see, you know, the natural God-given ability to hit. And, you know, I think he's another guy from a prospect standpoint and from an expectation standpoint. I think he has a really good chance to play in the major league. And even, like I said, some of the younger guys that came up late, like Morrison and Garcia, I mean, those guys are, you know, 18 years old, and they're playing in a college league, and they're not overmatched. So, I mean, that tells you something that over the next 3 or 4 years, when you look at development-wise, those guys are really ahead of the curve. And you look at a guy like Kyle Winters, who also was a high school draft pick from a couple years ago, and, I mean, he pretty much, you know, from my opinion, he dominated this league. If it wasn't for, you know, at sometimes a lack of offensive production or you know, shaky defense from a standpoint of the guys playing behind him, there's no telling what his numbers would look like as far as wins and losses go. So they really stick out in my mind that have really shown well, and I look at those guys as prospects from a standpoint of they have a really good chance, you know, to play in the major leagues.
Is that part of the sales pitch by the scouts when they're talking to these draftees, that being in the Marlins organization and given the youth movement that's going on here, that it's a better opportunity for you to sign with us and to also work through, because the odds are you'll get to the majors quicker than normal. Is that a discussion with these players?
Well, I think, I mean, from the scouting standpoint, because you only usually get one draft pick per round,
Right.
You're going into the draft and you're saying you want to take the best player available. Whenever your pick come around, you have your draft board and you have these guys ranked in relations to, you know, their tools. So when your draft pick come around, I mean, signability plays a part in that, as far as is this guy signable for the amount of money that we would want to give him given the round. But at the same time, I think that most of the players that are playing collegiate baseball or playing high school baseball, amateur baseball that is, they're playing and they're committed to their careers. So to be drafted and signed by a professional baseball team, I think if you were to ask any of those guys, it wouldn't really matter what team.
You keeping track of, I realize in your position as a rover, which is a dual role, did Mike have 2 roles last year? I don't remember him talking about.
No, Mike was the manager here, and that was really his assignment. It actually, last year we didn't have an outfield and base running rover instructor within the organization, so they kind of created that role for me, seeing it as a need throughout the whole organization. And when Mike decided not to come back and manage here, and the organization was pretty much left with a vacancy, they approached me with the idea, and I accepted, the opportunity, with the notion that the first half of the season, it'll give me a chance to robe and really, really, work hands-on with all of our outfielders, and then at the same time, to stay on the field from a standpoint of my development goal in managing games and managing players. I saw it as a win-win situation.
Well, having done both, what's your preference now? Managing or being a rover, we have a broader base of people that you can impact?
I actually think I haven't even gotten to the point where I can make a sound decision on that right now. I love the competitive part of being on the field. I love game management. And at the same time, I know from an organizational standpoint, the impact in which I can have by being a rover and being able to touch each and every team, all the way from the major league team all the way down to our rookie league. So I think that that's something that will work itself out over the next couple of years.
One of the last times I saw you at the ballpark, you were comfortable just like this, sitting in a chair. And how did that come about? I'm not sure that most people even read much about that.
Well, in baseball, there are some things that happen that, from a management standpoint or even a player standpoint, that realistically it just comes with the territory. And I'm a firm believer from a management standpoint, and I've told my players this, from day one, that I will always protect them, and they know that, they respect me for that. So my suspension was more so based on situations that happened throughout the year, and the president issued basically a letter, a warning, saying that if I was to get thrown out or ejected from another game, that I would be suspended for, 3 games. And the situation happened over in Mahoning Valley, where they threw at one of our guys, and one of our guys ended up hitting one of their guys. The umpire immediately throws our guy out of the game. I didn't think it was warrant because of the fact that the batter before that, he walked on 4 pitches, and then he ends up, hitting the next guy. So I went out to the umpire, and I'm arguing with him in reference to, if my guy was intentionally throwing at somebody, he would hit the first guy that got in the batter's box. I said, this is this kid's first out in here. He's come here from rookie ball. This is his first time underneath the lights. He has command issues. I said, so, from that situation, and I kind of lost my head a little bit and got excited, trying to protect my guys, and ended up getting thrown out of the game, and eventually being suspended for 3 games.
It must have been weird to sit up there and to watch the game, and because you're there. I mean, you're physically in the ballpark,
Mm-hmm.
and things are happening in front of you, and you can almost touch the players and not be able to really control it. Is that difficult?
That is very hard, because you're watching the game from a fan perspective, but at the same time, that you're usually right there in the mix of, the different things that are happening on the field, and at that point, you are basically hands off.
Right.
So, I mean, that was very difficult. But Iapolse and Duffy, and they had John Pearson come into town. They did a great job in my absence.
Jared Schweitzer.
As we work our way here to the bottom half of the 3rd inning. Brad Furnish has given up just 1 hit so far. He's been betrayed by a couple of walks and a couple of errors to this point. That's why he's down 3-2 in this ball game. And here's the pitch to the Coghlan, lefty and lefty, and that ball is down low in the dirt and gets away from Steve Gonzalez. And ball 1 ball and no strikes. Solano is way up on the cut at 3rd base. They play him straight away in the outfield. Furnish now stares in. The lefty kicks and deals, and that is lined on the ground in the hole in the left field for a base hit. Coghlan will make the turn at first, and he'll hold up there. And a leadoff single for Jamestown. The 2nd time in the first 3 innings they've had the leadoff man aboard. And here comes John Rayner. He singled and scored a run in games. against the Spikes at this point. Rayner comes into this one at 270 with 4 home runs and 18 knocked in. He also has 3 triples this year. Coghlan with the lead off at first. 3-2 Jamestown leads it here in the bottom half of the 3rd inning. The pitch, checked it, did not go. 1 ball, no strikes. Rayner is, as I mentioned, there are only 4 players in the lineup tonight for Jamestown that were here the last time State College played here on the 5th, 6th, and 7th of July. There's been a changeover in the roster here. Furnish to the plate. That's lifted in the air, foul territory. Wilkerson gives chase. This will be a tough one. It goes toward the fence, and it bounces on the warning track into the bullpen as Schweitzer, Gorsett, and Wilkerson converge, but the ball landed in between the 3 of them and bounced out of play. Pitch on the ground, picked up by Solano. He has 1 play to first. He makes that play, and moving to second is Coghlan. So one gone, but a runner in scoring position for Jamestown here in the 3rd inning. Virtually no wind, the flag not moving at all here. Pitch by Brad, in the dirt, good, Blake Gonzalez. Furnace the lefty, 2nd round pick out of TCU. Here's the 1-1. And that's on the inside corner for a call. Strike, it's 1 ball and 2 strikes. 1 gone. They count 1 in the 1st and 1 in the 2nd. They've out hit Jamestown 5-2, but they're down 1 on the board. 3-2. Now Gonzalez gives the sign. Coghlan now gets his lead at second. Shading is Schweitzer. The pitch by Furnish, hit in the air, left center field gap. Over goes Rappaport. Reels it in. Tagging is Coghlan. Here's the throw to 3rd. Not in time, and a head first slide by Coghlan to get himself to 3rd base. Good piece of base running that time by Coghlan. 2 gone here in the 3rd. It was the first time in the 4th of July weekend. He had only been hitting at that time 125 going into the game. Then he started to find himself, and now McDougal is at 270 on the season. He has 4 home runs. Now he's in a groove. Now they've also moved him up to 5th in the order. That's hit in the air, right field, down the line. It's going to be a foul ball. Gorsett chases and makes the catch in foul territory to end the inning.
Ties this year. You walk in, I know you and I talked back in January, my gosh. And so you had certain hopes and expectations and ideas. And here we are now in September, the eve before, or the day of the last home game. What surprise was there for Bo Porter?
I don't think I was really surprised by too much. I think that, you know, the expectations that I laid out as far as the players go, as far as the development part of it, I think that, I mean, I'm pretty satisfied. I know the organization is satisfied, you know, from the people I've talked to, and I've talked to the players, and they, you know, they're pretty satisfied with the development in which they were able to make throughout the course of the year. And that was the main objective, you know, from start to finish, to see these guys develop and be able to advance on in their career.
Do you find that, are you in kind of daily contact with John, is it Frierson?
Yeah. Pearson?
Pearson, Jeff Pearson. Is that normally who you keep in contact with, or is it Jim Fleming? How does the pecking order work?
Well, John Pearson is the field coordinator.
Yep.
Then you have Brian Chatton, who's the minor league director. And then you have Jim Fleming, who is the vice president, and he oversees the whole minor league operation. I mean, John Pearson, if you have a disciplinary problem or something field-related, then you would talk to John Pearson. If you have like a player movement or, you know, contract, you know, situation or something like that, or travel, you would talk to Brian Chatton in his department. But in our organization, it's one of those things where it's pretty much, you know, we try to systematically, from a standpoint of the protocol, to make sure that everybody stays in the loop in relations to whether it's a pitching situation where you're going to talk to the front office people, but you're also going to talk to Wayne Rosenthal, who's the pitching coordinator. If it's a, you know, infield situation, you're going to talk to Ed Romero. If it's outfield and base running related, they're going to talk to me. So, and hitting goes through John Milley. So, I mean, we all give each other that common courtesy that if it's dealing with your area, you always talk to the, you know, the coach that handles that area in relations to, you know, the player in which you're talking about.
We often, as a fan in the stand, you see the folks with the radar guns, and you see folks like Jim Fleming, and they're taking notes. When the game is over, do you confer with them, or do they just keep independent notes, in which they report back to Chatton and Fleming?
No, you talking about our pitchers?
Scouts, well, your scouts, you know, you get scouts that are in the stands, do you guys get together after the game and confer?
Well, other team scouts?
No, your team scouts. So when Fleming and the roving instructors and they're in the stands and they're taking notes,
Mm-hmm.
is it normal that after the game you guys all sit down and
Yes.
talk about the game, or do they just report independently?
No, we'll sit down and talk about the game and different things, and majority of the time, we all have the same stuff.
Yeah.
We all have the same information, because I mean, there's fun. I mean, and when you're watching the game and the notes in which you're taking notes in relations to, you know, how was the game decided, you know, win or loss, you know, what key plays led to, you know, that play. So all that information, any fundamental things that take place, you always write those things down, because those are excellent teaching tools for the players, whether they were successful or whether they failed. You can use that as a teaching tool.
How much opportunity do you have during the game to actually teach? So there's a base running error, or there is a throwing, whether it's an error or the cutoff play is off. Do you teach it right there, or do you kind of wait till after the game and recap it?
Well, I think fundamental things at this level, you want to pull the player aside and you want to explain it to him, you know, in a sense that if it happens again in that game, you're hoping that they're able to take the information which you've given them and go out and be successful the next time around. But I made common practice, and it's common practice in our organization, that the first 5 or 10 minutes after the game is over, we have basically all the team, they sit down and we go over the game notes, all of those notes in which we take, we go over those notes with the players, good, bad, or indifferent, to really stress to them the fundamental parts of it, or stress to them, you know, what they could have done differently, or the things in which we've done well, and how they were able to help us, you know, win the ball game.
Having done this now for a year, if you had to rewind and do anything differently, just from a strategic planning viewpoint as a manager, would there be anything different?
I think that this year, I think as the year went on, that these guys fatigued a little bit down the stretch, and I think that has more so to do with the pitchers, more so because most of these guys are college guys, and unlike spring training for regular, you know, spring training, which starts for March for most minor league guys, these guys they've been going since January, because college baseball season starts in January. And as they go a full college baseball season, they get drafted, they go to a mini camp, and now they start their baseball season. So they're almost playing baseball from January all the way to the 1st of September, which, you know, without a full spring training in between the college season and their professional season. So if I had to go back, the one thing that I would do, I would monitor a little bit close. I would monitor closer the number of pitches and innings in which the pitchers would be throwing early in the year to try to keep those guys strong, you know, for the duration of the season.
Funny, Mike had that same comment. He didn't appreciate the fatigue factor of the players.
It's definitely a factor. It's a factor. Like I said, you look at, you know, from January, and, you know, there's no telling, you know, from a college standpoint, you know, how much traveling these guys have done, or so forth and so on. And the players who are playing full season minor league baseball, they report to spring training in March. They have a complete complete month of, you know, spring training, and then they break for their season, and they go from, you know, from April to, you know, September. Whereas these guys, they go from January, you know, all the way through, you know, May, you know, June, depending upon, you know, what program they're in. They get drafted immediately. They're shipped off. They go to the organization in which they're drafted by. They go through a short mini camp. We had a 4-day mini camp here, and now you off and playing. So that's the fatigue factor is one of the things that I would definitely look at a lot closer.
How much did you find the transition for the college players and the high school players from the aluminum bat to the wood bat? How long did it take for them to sort of get back at that swingability? I've heard that term.
Well, I mean, most of the guys today, from an offensive standpoint, most of the guys who are you know, have admirations to play professional baseball, they start swinging wooden bats by the time they're, you know, freshmen, sophomores in high school. And I mean, even the program in which I work with a lot of kids at home in Houston, I mean, all of our kids, you know, swing wooden bats, and that they actually play in probably, you know, 10 to 15 wooden bat tournaments a year. So from an offensive standpoint, I think the hitters swing wooden bats a lot more. From a pitching standpoint, I think is where the biggest difference takes place. I think from a pitching standpoint, because pitchers in college, they use the aluminum bat, and you know, with the aluminum bat, the ball travels a little bit farther. You don't really have to square the ball up for it to be a hit or for it to be a home run. I think a lot of pitchers seem to get to this level and they almost have what I call the aluminum bat syndrome. They're afraid to throw their fastball in the strike zone because in their mind, the hitter's gonna hit the ball in the ballpark. And they don't realize that they don't have an aluminum bat anymore, they have a wooden bat, and you really have to put a good swing on the ball for it to leave the ballpark. So from a pitching, I think it affects pitchers more because they seem to pitch away from contact because they're so used to doing that in college because of the aluminum bat.
That's interesting. Do you also sit and grade the other team as well, or do you make notes of, you know, last night, for example, Auburn, if there was somebody who was noteworthy, do you actually make a note of that?
We have to do reports on every team in the league. And when I say reports, you're going to report on any player from another team that you think is a prospect, or if you think they are an organizational guy from a standpoint where maybe he's not a prospect for the major leagues, but he's an organizational player that will be an upgrade to our organization if we were able to acquire him some kind of way. So, I mean, and that's probably one of the biggest parts of our job outside of the, you know, the development of our players is being able to evaluate the other, you know, the other organizational players and find, because there's always trades, there's Rule 5, there's free agency. So you want to have a database of information of players, you know, each and every year that they're playing professional ball, so that when those things come about, that you have reports on those guys that would help our scouting department or help our front office when it comes time to make trades. I mean, you look at our major league team right now, and majority of that team, you know, with, you know, you got Dan Ugler who came in Rule 5, you have Henry Ramirez, you know, Jacobs, you know, all those guys, you know, Reggie Abercrombie was claimed off waivers. So, I mean, you look at our major league team right now and you see how important those reports are because you're able to get, you know, quality players from other organizations by the reports that are being written by the coaching staff and the people that's in the minor leagues that play against these guys.
Are you given a list of who the prospects are, for example, when you go to Lowell or some team you don't play very often? Does somebody say, hey, look, can you look at these 5 guys?
No, I mean, that's what makes it difficult. When you have a team like Lowell, you only play one time, it's 3 games, you have to really zero in on the players. That's why I always have my stopwatch, and you're getting times from home to first. You know, is he a speed guy? You're really watching the swing closely. Can he handle the bat? You know, you go out a little bit early. You want to watch batting practice because you want to be able to grade guys the best you can in order to, you know, to have the information as close to precise as possible. And you know, there's margin of error, you know, in anything in which you're talking about a grading system. But at the same time, you want to be able to really hone in on those guys and put together a good report.
Do you confer much with the other managers and coaches? Do you share information, or is it pretty much competitiveness?
It's competitiveness, but at the same time, if you sometimes you talk to managers and they'll leak, you know, a player's, you know, well, this guy here can really do this, he can really do that. So I mean, sometimes you can get information, you know, from talking to other managers, but for the most part, I mean, you talk to your coaches, and you guys, you know, evaluate the other team, you know, in that manner.
Within the league itself, who are the prospects? You've seen now just pretty much most of the teams in the leagues. Are there 5 guys that said these are can't-miss guys in the New York Penn League on other teams?
Well, I mean, I've actually seen quite a bit of talent, you know, in this league, and I actually think that this was a really good draft across the board. with the college guys that came in that I was able to see in this league. I'm not going to reveal any names,
Yep.
just because from a standpoint of, like I said, possible trades and different things
Sure.
that take place, you don't ever want to put information like that out there.
Right.
But I think that competitively and across the board, that this is a really good league this year.
If you had to fast forward and tell me today who will be the winner of the New York Penn League, who will it be?
I actually, see, we didn't play the other divisions too much,
Right.
but even within our division, I really thought that Mahoning Valley was one of the better teams in the division. But our division, we just beat up on each other.
Okay.
I mean, it's just, you look up and down the division, and everybody seemed to have that one team that they just didn't play well against, and it really had a huge outcome in the way the division was, shaped up. But I don't know. I think that when you get to this time of the year, it's pretty much a team that's hot. I mean, Auburn's been hot, so in a 3-game series and 2 3-game series, it's really, you can flip a coin.
Auburn historically has seemed to win their division all the time. They seem to be the top team in the league, and they always seem to lose. That's been their history here the last 4 or 5 years. Within the organization itself, some of your players have gone up, and we, the fans, have sort of lost track of some of them, like Sinkville. Could you give us a little bit of an update on some of the players who may have started here in Jamestown and how they're doing now in
Well, actually, I think all the other teams in our organization completed their seasons, I think, as of yesterday. So I think we're really the only team that have a couple games left. But Sinkville finished in Greensboro. From reading the reports and my understanding that he did a great job. He will be going to mini camp. I'm trying to think who else was here that went to Greensboro. We didn't have many players that, I know Bradley Stone went to Greensboro, and he did an outstanding job. He pitched out of the bullpen there and had some pretty good numbers. And position player wise, I don't think we really had anybody that went from here to Greensboro, position player wise.
You had some people go down.
Trying to think of the transactions. We did have some shuttle stuff going on, but that was more so when injuries happened, or when Cousins got hurt. We had Augustine come up, and we had who else came up? Severio came up. But all of those transactions was more so fill-in type of situations because of injuries.
I think it seemed like there wasn't quite as much movement of players this year than there has been in prior years. It seemed, and maybe that was by design, other than a few injuries, that they pretty much wanted to keep the same team here. Or maybe that was a misimpression on my part. Did you feel like there's a lot of guys?
No, we didn't have much movement at all. And the times that we did have movement, like I said, it was more so, based around a guy being injured and going to be out for a period of time. So you bring up one of the younger guys so that they can fill in during that time. But then when the player who was injured comes back healthy, that guy usually goes back to the team he came from.
We hear a lot about pitch counts. Are you a fan of that? Is that an important part of the instruction you get from on high when Brett Sinkville has 50 pitches and 55? And is that part of the organizational thought process, or is that something where you, Bo Porter, if you had your druthers, you'd like to be able to use it more, let these guys go as well as they can in a certain game situation?
Well, I think it's definitely an organizational policy, and I'm in total agreement with it. I think that when you're talking about development, even, you look at the major leagues and pitchers go to the mound, they have a pitch count. And it's more so because baseball is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So when you have a guy in the course of a year who's going to make 35, 36 starts, you do want to monitor the number of pitches and the number of innings in which he's going to log, for the standpoint of what I talked about before, the fatigue factor of wanting that guy to be strong from April all the way through, if you're fortunate enough, October. So if you allow a guy to go out in April, and just like in spring training, when the pitchers first go to the mound in spring training, they're going 2 innings, 30 pitches. The next time out, they may go 3 innings, 45 pitches. So they're building up to be able to go 6, 7 innings. At the same time, as the season go along, you want to make sure that you're monitoring that guy so that when September, October rolls around, that he's still able to go 6, 7 innings. And you don't want to blow a guy out early in the year.
Similarly, with certain prospects that you have, and they may be in an awful slump, you know, batting-wise, are you encouraged to continue to play this guy right through the slump, even though there may be another positional player that is really hot? I mean, do you have that kind of weight on your shoulder in making managerial lineup decisions?
Well, I was actually fortunate in the situation in which I was put in here because I was actually able to play whoever I wanted to play. But at the same time, if you look at our team, everybody played.
Right.
And I explained that to the players, you know, from the beginning of the season, because I think at this level right here, it's hard to really, you know, pinpoint exactly who's going to make it to the major leagues.
Mm-hmm.
And because they were a scout thought enough of them to draft them, then I feel like they should be given every opportunity to have an opportunity to, you know, advance in their career. So I myself, I made it my priority to make sure that all the guys played and no guy was able to, you know, come to the park 3-4 days without getting into the game. So, but at the same time, when a guy is struggling, you try to find matchups that would help him get out of the slump. You want to continue. The last thing you want is for the player to lose their confidence or think that you've lost confidence in them. So you try to make sure that, you know, that he's going to continue to get his at-bats and have a chance to work out of his slump.
Do you find that the facilities here in Jamestown, other than January when you saw some snow all over the place, you really had your first chance during the minicamp to just take a look at the field itself and the park, and you've also played in a lot of other parks. How does this sort of compare with other things?
I actually think our playing surface is really good. The stadium itself, it's nice. I think that the surface, the playing surface is a good playing surface. So in relation to the other parks, I think that I think all the parks that we played at in this league were fairly decent, all of them.
Did you find how did the players find the community support? Did you find that they were able to integrate it all, or because this is really, for many of the players, this is their first chance?
From my understanding, and I know talking to Matt and talking to George, that the fan support this summer was really good. From my understanding, it was better than it had been in the last few summers. And I think George said it had a lot to do with the players and myself actually getting out in the community and doing different things in which we did throughout the year. So, and I told the players in the beginning that, you know, from a standpoint of wherever you're playing at, you know, from a professional baseball standpoint, that the fans, you owe it to the fans to, you know, to reach out and be a part of the community, because the fans are actually the ones that support you and allow this game, this great game that we all play, allow it to happen.
Well, it's so wonderful for the players who pause, sign autographs, be part of that process, because for so many kids, it's as close as many will ever get to somebody who's a professional ball player.
Mm-hmm. And the example I gave them is, I think at one point in time, all of us was that little kid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know growing up in New Jersey, I used to go to the Yankees and the Mets games, and my whole objective was to get autographs. So, I mean, and when you explain it to the guys in that manner, and they think back to their childhood when they went to games, it kind of puts it in perspective of how important it is. And you know, as a kid, how great it made you feel for Reggie Jackson to stop and sign your ball. Right. So, I mean, you can look back to your own childhood and know that at one point we were all at that point.
As you leave Jamestown in a couple of days, by the way, we enjoyed having your wife not only in the community part of the stands, and it was fun. She was an integral part of that fan base. She was
Thank you
very
so much.
Circulated, and people felt very comfortable talking with her.
Mm-hmm.
So, on behalf of the community, thanks to both of you. But is there a walk away if you had to, for the net manager who may be succeeding you next year, saying here's something to keep in mind when you come to Jamestown? Is there sort of an instruction sheet that you would give the next guy?
I think that, I mean, as long as they have experience within the game, like I said, I think that this is a good place. As far as the travel go, the travel is not really that bad in relation to where we're located. I think Lowell was like the farthest trip that we had this year, and I think that could have a lot to do with the scheduling part of it. But at the same time, I think that whoever comes here next year, I think that even with the draft picks that we had this year, our high school draft picks, I think you look at our GCL team, which is our Gulf Coast League team, they had a pretty productive summer, and you look at that group of kids coming here next year, I think the future is bright for Jamestown and the Marlins.
Are the Marlins comfortable with the relationship here?
From my understanding, yes, I haven't heard any adverse information at all.
Yeah, I've heard very positive stuff. You know, you have been an impact guy. It's been fun to watch your enthusiasm, and more times than not, when there was a controversial call, you could see that defensive back, Bo Porter, running right out there with lickety-split speed and making sure that you protected your players and stuff like that. And I can tell you, we haven't seen that in a long time. So that aggressiveness on your part, the aggressiveness of the hit and run, the steals, the let's manufacture a run. And I don't know if that was that's always been your style, or something where this year you decided that maybe you needed to work a little harder to get the runs because maybe the offensive one there. But that was a sense we had that you had things moving. Your mind was active.
Well, I think from a managerial standpoint, you have to use the players in which you have to take what it is they can do and maximize it. And we were a team that, if you look up and down our lineup, we really didn't have home run hitters. We didn't have guys that can bang the ball out of the yard. We did have a few guys, who can handle the bat. We had a few guys that can run. So given, the players in which we had, I think offensively, that was the type of game that we needed to play. Now, if we had a different type of team, if we had 3 or 4 guys with 15 to 16 home runs, then we would have played a little bit different. But given the team that we had, I think that we made the most of the situation as far as hitting and running, stealing bases, situationally hitting and moving runners. So, I mean, and when I say development, when I look at from the start of the season to the end of the season, all of the players from an offensive standpoint, they're leaving here with a true grasp of what it takes to be a winning offensive baseball player. So, I mean, from a standpoint of development, these guys are going to be able to go on to the next level, and the next level, and the next level, and be able to be productive offensive players.
This has been terrific, folks. I really appreciate your kind of recap of what you've had here in Jamestown. You've left a mark here, and I'm sure we're all going to be anxious to see your progress through the Marlins organization. And I'm sure you're going to be watching, as you currently do, with the Marlins rise.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, what a year they've had. If you again fast forward into October, you suspect the Marlins are starting to really peak, so that September's, they're positioned well for the September run?
I think you look at our schedule, and I don't think that we would want it any other way. We have, I think, 10 games against Philadelphia, in which they are right there in the hunt with us. So we kind of control our own destiny in some regards. So I think that you're right. We're peaking at the right time, and we have a young enough and youthful enough team that I don't think fatigue is going to be a factor. And because they're so young and energetic, I think that that's going to bode well for us and give us an opportunity to possibly get into the playoffs.
You'd like to get that ring, wouldn't you?
That would be wonderful.
Well, congratulations and thanks so much, Bo. This is terrific.
Well, I want to thank you guys also, and I want to thank the city of Jamestown and George and Matt and all the people down at the stadium. It's been a great summer, and I appreciate everything.
Great. Thank you, and thanks to Stacy.
Thank you.
Mike, and since Mr. Peterson's here with a camera, I'm going to ask you to stand behind the mic, John, because Mr. Greg is our TV guy. You're going to see this on Peterson TV, Channel 19, some night when you're in town. But please give a warm welcome to John Peterson, our field coordinator for the Florida Marlins. He's going to share a little bit. John, when you get done, we're going to leave some time for some question and answering for them. But I appreciate you taking the time on a busy day when you got a lot of other things to do for a game night. But thank you for spending time with us here tonight, and give this to you.
Together, but excuse me.
You have a good man involved.
He's I got to puff up my chest on him because I'm the one that brought him into the organization. I had him when I was a Cub. He was when I was a hitting coach at the A level. He came through and just a fantastic man. And you know, he's going to be in the big leagues very soon. I mean, he has so much talent and energy and knowledge, and hopefully we'll